Welcome to Left Right USA. We are talking today about the state of the United States and the Constitution. And I have a guest today. This is Elizabeth, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I am Elizabeth. I live in a blue state. And when we moved here like 20 years ago, I was a red in a blue state, and the red has become more and more embarrassing. So I continue to be a Republican, but I am not voting Republican very much right now because it's been horrific in a lot of ways. I have three kids, 15, 19, and 25. And I work part-time at the public library as customer service.
All right.
That's about it.
Thank you very much for being on today with us as we talk about these honestly really critical issues for so many of us. And I think we're similar in that we're both Republicans, but we're both very concerned. And I, for one, never used to pay any attention to politics, but now that consumes a large percentage of my day. So let's get to talking a little bit. First,
All right.
we want to mention that our country has had problems since well before President Trump was elected the first time. That years prior to the 2016 election, major monitoring groups have downgraded the United States from full democracy to flawed democracy because of congressional dysfunction, political polarization, and the influence of money in politics. Institutional gridlock, erosion of voting rights, executive overreach, all of those issues have come into play and were causing problems that we, the regular Americans, saw for a long time, which probably led to people wanting to vote for President Trump because he promised to be a disruptor of the system, and that people saw the need for a disruption of the system. So yes, we've had problems for a long time. And I know there was an interesting study in 2014 that found that the preferences of average citizens, the bottom 90% of income earners, we'll call those average citizens, have a near zero statistically insignificant impact on public policy, meaning what you want is not what happens.
That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where someone does a study and you're like, duh, of course, everyone sees that, And we saw for so many years, even though I didn't pay attention to politics more than I could help, you basically just saw your representative doing very little but blame the other side.
Yes. Well, and that's all that you saw.
Yeah.
There's more going on,
right.
But you don't see that. That's not what anybody publicizes.
Right. They did it. I think our representatives and government leaders have done a terrible job of explaining what government actually does and what they're doing and what they have actually accomplished versus just like, oh, the other side, it's their fault. And we've seen that for years.
They're afraid to say anything because then the other side might make use of it as well.
Right.
When you see them get interviewed and stuff like that, they're very careful not to say anything concrete because the sound bites can be used to make it sound differently, or there's nuances going on that need to be explained that don't get explained in short. Anyway,
Plus, really it's way easier to blame someone else.
Absolutely.
Than to do something about it yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've seen that there's a problem. What we want has made little difference in public policy. Government policy basically is heavily skewed towards the interests of affluent individuals and organized business groups. So we've all seen that. So we generally only see the policies we favor enacted if they happen to align with those of the economic elite. That's the real problem. And I think that a lot of people who do align with the economic elite don't want us to pay attention to that. So,
absolutely.
There's been a big push and a lot of money spent to get us fighting each other instead of paying attention to that fact. Um, I wanted to take a little quick minute to plug the 80% Bill Project.
Now, I haven't heard about this, so I'm fascinated.
Yeah, if you go to their website, and we'll include that in the links in the video, this is a list of 22 bills that 80% of Americans agree on. So this is great. And if you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, yep. If you go down the list, and they have a description of each one and a link to actual proposed legislation that's before Congress for each one. So
So
it's a great place
what
to
kinds of
start.
things are on the list?
Oh, like getting big money out of politics, all
Ah,
yeah, veteran care, things like that. Everyone agrees on them, right?
uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
so go check that out. I'll definitely plug that. Um, so when we're talking about big money in politics, um, it's surged to unprecedented levels. How much money is being spent? We just saw that in the recent primaries. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
most expensive primary ever
Mm-hmm.
that unseated Thomas Massey. It's crazy how much money is being thrown into this. Um, we saw that during the 2024 election cycle, over $14 billion was spent just by 300 billionaire families, accounting for 19% of that, as opposed to just in 2008, billionaire contributions were only 0.3% of federal campaign donations. Now it's 19%. That's like a 6,000% increase.
Now,
So
part of
it's
the reason why
crazy.
this is allowed is because of the Citizens United case. Have you read about that one
Yes.
with the Supreme Court? And so there's these super PACs that have been created, and I didn't know what a super PAC was. I just thought it was, it's a place where they put a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a political action committee, a PAC, is a group of people or organization that can is involved with elections and politics and things like that. A super PAC isn't just a bunch of them. Super PACs are actually unlimited, sorry, they're independent expenditure only PACs, political action committees. And so they can get unlimited money from any people, from any organization, and they can spend it. There's no limit on how they can spend it. The only supposed is that they're not supposed to coordinate with any particular
Directly.
campaign.
Yeah.
But in de facto, in reality, there's coordination. And this seems like, to me at least, such a horrible opening of the door for all sorts of misuse and just anybody pouring money into anywhere they want.
I agree. And in specific, that Citizens United decision gave businesses the ability to
Mhm.
donate to political campaigns. And I think that's a
Yeah.
terrible idea. I think it should just be the individual voters.
Yes.
Now,
It's
I
bad
like,
enough. It's bad enough that some voters are way richer than others. But when you
yeah,
make it a corporation, that's even
yeah,
more.
even more skewed, and our voices
Mhm.
get drowned out. Yeah. Now, I like my husband's idea for a reform of campaign finance. He's like, let's just
Yeah.
make legislation that you can only vote for a candidate if you're eligible. I mean, you can only donate to a candidate if you're eligible to vote for them.
Ah.
It makes sense to me. It would get rid of corporate donations because corporations can't vote yet.
Oh,
And,
that's true.
it get rid of outside money poured into a state that's not even yours. Just it would be really nice, and no proxy donating. You can't donate to someone else to donate for the
This
candidate.
is true. The first thing that occurred to me was that there are situations where somebody else's state's elections affect me because of whether or not they're going to support my guy in Congress and things like that. So that was my first thought was that would kind of, because I have a few times donated a little bit um,
To
to
people
kind of
you
help.
can't vote for. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, that makes sense. But then I want to call them a lot of times and say, hey, would you please get your act together about XYZ? And, they
Yeah.
don't listen to me.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. So big money in politics. The deadlock in Congress, desires of the bottom 90% not really taken into account. We've seen all of that.
Hmm.
Um, we've seen a huge decline in civility in the United States, both
No.
online, from our elected officials, and the general public.
I thought everybody was really nice and polite.
It's been getting worse.
Yes, it has
It's
very
not
much
just
been getting
it's
worse.
not just kids these days. No, everyone notices it. So a survey last year found that half of Americans believe civility has declined in just the past 12 months, and we see that.
Mhm.
We see that,
Yeah.
and I liked I looked up a panel that the National League of Cities did, which was cool. And they specifically mentioned disruptive behavior in council chambers, hostile public comments, internal bullying among elected officials. But one of the most pressing concerns they mentioned was how do we maintain civility among elected officials themselves? And we see that.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
problem.
Well, and there's
Uh,
not much you can do. I mean, you can teach your kids not to fight, but there's not much you can do if they see, I don't know, when the people at the top who have the most influence are the worst, and
yeah,
there's no checks and there's no shame
right.
for what they say.
Yeah, that's a problem. I don't want that in my elected officials that are
Mhm.
representing my country that are serving as an example to my kids. You know, I want civility.
Yes.
Um, so even though we've seen problems in the United States, it's really this administration and its actions have been greatly hastening the decline in our American democracy. And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. So, there are multiple global organizations that assess democracy,
Hmm.
and all of them have reflected a recent significant steep decline in US democratic indicators. They're placing our nation in a
Hmm.
historic era of democratic erosion. And
So the statistics, do you have statistics over time to see how?
yeah, if you go look at the individual indicators,
Uh-huh.
and we'll put some of them in the description. But yeah, it's a huge, unprecedentedly fast decline
Oh my goodness.
in the various democratic indicators. That is never gone down that fast before. It's
Hmm.
really going. So the indices point to executive branch consolidation, so attempts to centralize power within the presidency, politicization of oversight,
Yeah.
um, efforts to intimidate the judiciary. We've seen that a lot.
Oh yes.
The expansion of presidential immunity, restrictive voting rules, partisan gerrymandering. Oh my gosh, we've
Oh,
seen
I
that
hate
out the
gerrymandering.
wazoo. Attempts to politicize election administration as a critical threat to the electoral process. So all of these indicators plus more,
Yeah.
everyone's sounding the alarm. There's a group of 400 or so former like state officials, intelligence officials, etc.
Hmm.
A lot of them retired, called the Steady State, and they performed their own um, assessment of our democracy and put theirs out too. And they said the
Hmm.
same thing, but they're basically pointing out that these are real problems, and so many knowledgeable people are sounding the alarm. It's not just people on the left, it's
Hmm.
everyone. Retired judges, retired intelligence people, retired Department of Justice, retired judges, or fired,
Yeah.
astronauts are forming a group. 100 astronauts are forming a group for democracy.
Uh-huh.
Just everyone who's in the know is sounding the alarm. This is a problem,
Yes.
despite
It's
what we're being told in some corners of the media. This is
yeah,
a
and
real urgent problem.
so one of the things I was thinking about is that you're like, it's not just the people on the left, but see, part of the problem is that they keep defining the left to be further
Yes.
over, and that's part of the right becoming more and more the extremists. And so
Yeah, yeah.
people like us that used to be right are now being labeled
Considered
as
kind
part of the
of
left
leftist. Yeah, exactly. It's
because
like,
they're moving it
no,
over.
I
Yes.
feel like I'm just being practical. I
Yeah.
I just want to get along and adhere to our constitutional principles. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I see that we're falling away from those.
Especially
So,
by people who worship the const or claim that they worship the Constitution.
yeah,
And
although you
then
don't hear as much about that lately.
true, that's
You
true.
don't.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's more
Okay.
about national identity lately,
Yeah.
not about the Constitution. Um, but yet is a lot of evidence of coordinated payments to promote divisive and partisan messaging.
Yeah.
Um, so it spans domestic consultant networks, dark money operations, foreign funding schemes. All of that is compensating influencers and creators to
Uh-huh.
push specific narratives across digital platforms. It's in the traditional media, it's on the independent quote quote media.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it exists. A lot of evidence about that. We'll put some links in about that. So powerful interests, moneyed interests, want us angry. They want us scared, and they want us fighting each other.
Well, I
Now,
am angry and I
yeah,
am scared. I'm
mm-hmm.
trying not to fight people.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying not to do that. We're trying to come together.
Yes.
So what can we come back to? We can come back to each other. It's we the people. Um,
Mm.
so this year is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're thinking back about our roots as a country, about the Constitution, about the framers, about the people. You know, they revolted from England. They decided to set up a new government. Let's talk a little bit about those people and kind of what led them to go in that direction. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. I wish I'd taken the time to look up specific people. Um, I read a book once called The Signers of the Declaration of Independence, but it's been like 10 years. But it went through a page or two biography of each of them um,
Yeah, it's a good
and their
book.
incentives. And it's so funny because as a group, they did such a good thing, but they
Yeah.
had so many different opinions.
Yes,
But
they
I think
did.
this is, I don't think, I mean, what we're doing now is we're trying to, like you said, unite people. And some people think that means that we all have to convince each other. But
No.
no, we can all have these different opinions, but we need to figure out a way to work together to balance things out. It's not I win, you win. It's how are we making it work? And
Yeah.
and right now people are saying compromise is a bad thing. And it's like, but compromise is part of how we balance. I think I think the founders were brilliant. And I think, yeah,
They spent
as
a
a group,
lot of time
there's
really
some of them I
thinking this
dislike
through. Yeah,
as a
yeah,
group.
yeah, exactly. They spent a lot of time thinking through government and
Yes.
influences and how history played into what we might want to do as a new nation. And I think as a whole, they came up with an excellent framework
And if you think
for
about
us
it,
to hang all of our different opinions on, you know?
yes. And if you think about it, the Declaration of Independence was in 1776. The Constitution was written in 1787.
Right.
It was not like they sat down and wrote it. It was a really long process. They tried the Articles of Confederation for several years.
Yes.
There was a lot involved in coming up with something that finally had good basis, was simple and dynamic, that that's been great.
Yeah, I agree. And it's lasted almost a quarter of a millennium. So
Yes.
it has actually served to be a good framework, although we could probably stand to do a little bit of tweaking to make certain things more firmly into law instead of just being done by custom, because
Hmm.
now we're seeing that some of those things we used to do just by custom are now being kind of taken over or eroded
Yeah,
because there isn't firm law or consequences for breaking those things.
agreed. And part of it again is that whole thing of people have no shame
Yeah,
when they feel like they deserve it, when they feel get power hungry. Yeah, get
yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
And money seems to be a big driver. Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so we want to talk a little bit about the Constitution, about some of the various provisions in the Constitution, and how the conduct of this administration in particular has gone against constitutional principles in many ways, because that's really concerning to me. I don't care who's doing it. Whoever's doing it, I'm concerned.
Yes.
So let's start off with the separation of powers.
This is
Yeah.
one of the things that bugs me to death. when people talk about separation of powers, they seem to think it means that each group has their own power and they don't have any right to touch on anybody else's power. And separation of powers just means that each group is assigned something to be in charge of, and they're also each assigned something to be in charge of watching over each other.
Yeah.
Separation of powers does not mean the unitary executive, meaning that the executive branch, the president, can just do whatever he wants. It means that he has the power to do certain things, and Congress and the judiciary have the power to say that's too far, or that's wrong, or change it this way.
They're supposed to check each other,
Yes.
each part of the government. So basically, right, the executive has the power to make sure the laws are enacted, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is a
The
big part of the problem we have right now, is that executive branch is choosing not to do that
Yeah,
against their own people.
yeah,
That they'll do
exactly.
go way overboard against other people.
Yeah, exactly. Then the legislative branch, Congress, has the power to make the laws.
Hmm.
Um, and then the judicial branch has the power to judge whether those laws adhere to the Constitution and who has broken the law or not broken the law.
Hmm.
So that's their basic responsibilities, right? But each
Yep.
of those three branches have the ability to check the other branch in certain ways. So they do impinge a little bit on each other, and that is by design.
Yes.
As the framers did not want a king. They did not want one branch to have way more power than the other. They wanted them to be balanced so they
Uh-huh.
could check each other. So let's start with the unitary executive theory you mentioned.
Yes.
This administration has stated that it believes in a unitary executive. So what is that? Um, People who believe in a unitary executive believe the president should have complete unchecked control over the entire executive branch. They argue the president must be able to remove any appointed official at will, dictate administrative policy, and bypass statutory restrictions that insulate agencies from presidential authority.
And
Um,
interestingly, I mean, shoot, I was going to say it. Congress, anytime Congress says anything critical, they're like, oh, you don't have any authority because of separation of powers. And yet, Congress, one of the powers that Congress has, for example, is the power of the purse.
yeah,
And yet, the executive branch is now saying we can do whatever we want with money.
right.
And so, not only are they saying we have the right to have our powers unchecked, but we have the right to take your
Take your
powers too.
powers. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, exactly. So, but as we go through some of these different articles and
Okay.
sections of the Constitution, we're definitely going to get onto a bunch of those
Yes.
points. So let's take a look at Article 1. Section 1, Congress is given all legislative powers, the power to make laws. And we just talked about how executive orders are an attempt to bypass that power. And it's not just President Trump that's used them. Previous
No.
presidents have also used them probably more than they should have. So executive orders are only supposed to affect the federal agencies that are under the executive branch. They are not
Uh,
laws.
yes.
They
Even
cannot
though they're treated as
they
such.
cannot impact all of us. They're just for the federal agencies under the executive branch.
Now, this is
Um,
something that actually, I'm saying I've not been very political until like the last 10 years, but this is something that actually bothered me for even before, is how powerful the executive branch has gotten.
yeah,
I think from my personal opinion, a lot of it came from World War II and the Great Depression, when FDR kind of, when there's emergencies, it's kind of like somebody has to take the reins and
right,
drive.
right,
And he abused that power, executive orders for the Japanese internment camps, for example. But I think in some sense it was necessary for there to be a little more focus on the executive running things because of all the emergencies going on, and it never returned. The
yeah,
balance never was restored,
yeah,
and it's just gotten further and further along. And there was a little bit of an improvement after the whole Nixon thing, when okay, we let the president get away with things that are illegal, literally. And so there was
a little bit
some
of a
readjustment,
pullback. Yeah.
but not nearly enough
Yeah.
to and it didn't stay there at all.
Yeah. And I saw an interesting interview that Senator King, he's an independent, did with Heather Cox Richardson last year in April. And
Hmm.
he was talking a lot about the how Congress has allowed some of its powers
Hmm.
to go to the executive branch over the
Hmm.
years. And he said that the way he saw it was that a lot of Congress people didn't want the responsibility for making some of those tough decisions because they would get pushback from their constituency.
That makes sense.
And so they were allowing a lot of those powers to go to the executive, especially like in regards to tariffs or in regards to war,
Hmm.
and that type of thing. And I thought that was a really good point, that Congress has allowed that to happen. And I've seen a lot of people talk about how the framers didn't really envision that as a possibility. They thought that Congress members would be jealous enough of their own power that they would never allow those powers to go to the executive branch, but it has happened that way. So that's probably one of the things we need to do to tighten up with
Yes.
legislation so that doesn't happen, because then we don't have that balance and we don't have those checks that we were supposed to have according to the Constitution.
Well, part of the founders also did not have political parties in mind.
Yeah,
Their idea was that there would not be political parties, which causes an alignment between large sections of Congress and the President of the United States.
yeah,
And so that's when you have a large section of Congress and the president at the same time, one, you can make things happen,
right.
but two, you can make things happen and or not happen or
Yeah,
um, cause all sorts of problems. And I don't know what a solution for that one is because
I don't either, because
the
political
two-party
parties
system,
arose very
yes,
quickly,
yes.
after the Constitution
And
was
President
written.
Lincoln was very much, we need to have a two-party system because in a three-party system, the best person would lose because the two would jump up against him. And um, yeah,
We could look at some other countries and like how they do things with political parties
yeah,
and stuff and kind of think about that. But I
that
think
would be
for
interesting.
now, let's just try to say, okay, well, let's at least keep the responsibilities of Congress to Congress and not
Yes,
bleed it
yes,
over into the executive branch, whether allowing it or them taking it. So that would be a good
absolutely.
start. Then there's Section 8 of Article 1, where Congress is given the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. So that's where the
Really?
tariffs come in.
I never would have guessed.
Yeah. So most of President Trump's tariffs had been recently judged by the courts to have been illegally levied. And the government is having to give some of that tariff money back
And
because
it is a
who pays
mess.
tariffs? It's American companies. It's not other countries that pay the
Well,
tariffs. So,
and it's the small companies that are really getting messed over with
yeah.
that
Yeah.
because they don't have the resources that it costs money to apply to get your money back and things like that. And so it's, and the big companies actually charged us more when they had to pay the higher tariffs. And so they're
Yeah.
going to yeah, it's such a big mess and it
Yeah.
shouldn't have ever happened in the first place because
No.
he did not have the power to do it.
Congress should have taken that responsibility. If they thought tariffs ought to be levied, they should have done it and
Yeah,
not
exactly. And
leave
if
it to the
not, they should have
president.
said no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Then there is how, and also in Section 8, Congress is given the power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas. So that comes to blowing up the small boats in the Caribbean. Not only is it
Yeah.
against the military law, it's also supposed to be a responsibility of Congress to determine that. And that's not happening. They're not really saying much. Now we've had people who have protested in Congress and they've had hearings and stuff, but they haven't done anything about it.
Hmm.
And that's a real problem. I see that as not only breaking international law, but breaking our own law. Just why not just grab these people if there's evidence of breaking a law or smuggling drugs, whatever? Just take them into custody and actually try them. Why are we
Yeah.
just killing them? That makes us, the United States, basically a rogue nation. We're just
Yes.
blowing people up because we want to. We still haven't seen evidence, that
Yes.
any of these people actually, even if they were, if every single one of them was smuggling drugs and not just fishermen, you still have to go through a procedure to prove that they were doing something wrong. You don't just kill them.
I heard that there was, tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was there was a boat that they did capture and they were going to prosecute the guys, and then they ended up sending them back to their country because they didn't have any evidence.
There were two survivors.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, and they did end up sending it back to their country. And then there was another one where, of course, there was survivors, and then they
And
blew
they
them
just
up
blew them
too.
up.
Yeah,
I remember
so
that
there was
one.
two different instances there. But yeah, so that's a real problem. I don't want to be a rogue nation that's just
Uh-uh.
killing people. It would be the same thing as if you let policemen just shoot people who they thought were doing something wrong.
Oh, wait, we do let them do that.
Well, we shouldn't. It's against the law. So
I know, but yet you see it happening with, like the Alex Preddy shooting, and which I
yeah,
know you wanted to talk about later, but
yes, we will talk about that. Um,
so you see it in more than one area, the same problem.
yes, coming back to our constitutional principles. Okay.
Exactly.
Also in Section 8, Congress is given the power to declare war. Now, we know that's been a problem for a long time. Many presidents have infringed upon this. Many wars
Push
have
the
been
boundaries.
conducted without actually calling them wars. That's
Hmm.
a problem. That's something I think we should tighten up. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people agree with that. We ought to, if we're going to go to war, we should call it a war and Congress should declare it.
Hmm.
It shouldn't just be, oh, it's some police action, it's some, you know, excursion. It's no.
Little tripping through the fairs. And I think part of the problem with that one is that it was cleared up and defined more carefully, and that's just being ignored.
Yeah.
And and so what consequences can you give the president if the Congress doesn't get up and say, hey, there's
Yeah,
consequences?
and for years there have not been consequences, so that's a
Hmm.
problem.
Yep.
Um, in Section 8, Congress is given the power to make rules for the government. So that's something that has been definitely infringed upon with that unitary executive. Firing people against the law,
Hmm.
dismantling federal agencies that are formed by Congress, rendering federal agencies or oversight sections unable to perform their duties because you fired so many of the people in them. And then you didn't technically dismantle the agency, but it can't do anything because you took
Yeah,
away their money and you fired almost all the people. So, that's a problem that we've seen a lot of, and a lot of that's in litigation in the courts.
I think one of the problems with that is not just that it's that you're firing people who shouldn't be fired, but then also they're getting replaced by people whose um, the biggest requirement is that your loyalty to the unitary executive, your loyalty to President Trump or whomever, which also has the consequence that we have more and more, less and less competence
Yeah,
in these positions.
yeah,
We're getting more and more situations where the government is prosecuting somebody and they have no idea what they're doing. They're making mistakes. They're messing up the grand juries. Um,
right.
and we hear about the ones that are political, but there's other ones that are going on that are
Well,
just what
even
normally should have been a
state of
normal
like
prosecution.
diplomatic relations, we have
Yes.
almost no one who has experience who's even trying to conduct these things, and I think we see that reflected in the
Hmm.
problems we're having with not being able to resolve these disputes.
Absolutely.
Also in Section 8, Congress is given the power to regulate the military. Um, I have found some recent actions by the Secretary of Defense to be very concerning in regards to to reform the military's entire legal system is something they're doing, and they gave them 45 days to reform the entire legal system, and a lot of people are worried because Pete Hegseth has specifically said that he thinks a lot of the restrictions on what warfighters can do were stupid, rules of engagement. Um, and so people are very concerned if he's reforming the legal system of the military that he may make it basically so that those who used to say, hey, that's illegal action, you
Hmm.
can't do that, will no longer be able to speak out. I'm very concerned about that. banning the transgender military members, discouraging women in the military. All of that really should have been Congress's decision, not just a unilateral decision by the Secretary of Defense.
Have you read yet about the legal with the banning transgender in the military? The what's the court said just a day or two ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where
So,
they basically said, yeah, you can't do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And a
Uh-huh.
lot of the reason is that so you think that they have bigger medical bills, but you can't say as a group
Right.
they all can't be involved. You can target individuals who have big medical bills or whatever, or at least that's possible.
Yeah.
It's definitely bad to do this. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of these things, people say, well, if it wasn't legal, then how would they be able to do it? Well, the problem is this administration is doing a lot of illegal things, and then later people are trying to bring it to the courts because that's the only avenue left because Congress is not doing anything about it, even though it is clearly illegal or most likely illegal. And so a lot of this is taking its time to wend through the courts, and decisions are coming through. So
Yeah, the
they're
bottom line
doing
is,
things that no one has
yeah,
really ever done on this scale before. And you might say, a lot of people talk about, well, what about past presidents? Now, this is way bigger, so many
yeah.
more than has been done by previous administrations.
And it
So,
doesn't, and yes, past presidents are a problem, and that doesn't mean that we let it slide.
right,
It's not like we let it slide. We complained about those too.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't because I didn't pay attention, but you did.
All right. People in general complained.
Yeah, exactly. Then let's go to Section 9.
Okay.
Congress was given the power of the purse. We talked about this. Congress is the one who decides how to spend the money, and the framers did that on purpose because we can elect our congresspeople and so have a greater say in how our tax dollars are spent. Because the Congress represent fewer of us than just the president. The president's
Mhm.
supposed to represent all of us. So they thought the Congress would be much better suited to decide how to
Much more
spend
directly.
those
And
tax
and
dollars.
partly the members of Congress are in making the budget, if somebody was only looking at the whole country, there would be a lot of holes. But by having individual Congress members from different sections of the country who can point out there's this issue in my state, there's this issue in my county,
Right,
um, then things like that become anyway. It's not the budget cannot be just a blanket
right.
overall thing, even though that's the way we talk about it a lot.
But yeah, exactly. There's different needs in different parts of the country. And so
Hmm.
we have to have that be reflected in the spending. But this administration has illegally impounded at least $425 billion since President Trump was reelected.
That's a
And
horrific number.
yeah, and that is the Government Accountability Office is has been conducting many investigations into those impoundments and
Uh-huh.
has already found the government has broken the law in many of those investigations, and some of them are still in progress, partly because they're not getting the information they need. But so yes, it is illegal,
Hmm.
but they've been doing it anyway. Then there's all that Venezuelan oil money. we,
Hmm.
we, we took money from selling Venezuela's oil and sent it to a bank account in Qatar. Now it's back evidently in bank accounts in the United States, and they've paid out, I think, most of it to Venezuela. But it's like we still have control of it. But it's like, what's the deal with that? We're not supposed to be able to do that without a congressional law, just to be
Hmm.
able to, oh, let's seize some oil from another country and start selling it and then do whatever we want with the money. No, it's not supposed to work that way. Congress is in charge of the money. It's supposed to go into the Treasury. Congress decides what to do with it, not the executive branch. So that's a
Yes.
problem. And then there's a lot of money being moved from one branch to another, too. And there are rules about that. And some of the rules have been followed, but some of them haven't been followed. So, yeah, it's a problem.
Yes.
Then we look at Article 2 of the Constitution. In Section 1, the President swears to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, but we're talking today about how he's not.
Hmm.
And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Um, In Section 3, the president promises to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And we're talking today about how they've broken a lot of laws,
Well, see, and
as
if it's the
determined by the
executive,
courts,
yeah.
the Government Accountability Office, lots of places.
And if it's the executive branch's job, which it is, to make sure that the laws happen, that's why they can get away with breaking the law, because they're the ones who are supposed to stop themselves and they're not.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the courts can say something about it, but it's the executive branch is supposed to be making sure those laws are executed.
Yeah.
So
And the courts can say whatever
problem.
they want, but if the executive branch doesn't make that happen, there's just there's a hole. There's a big hole.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, what makes that actually happen if one of the
Yes.
branches goes off the rails, you know? Yeah,
Yes.
that's the problem. Then there's Article 3. Section 2, the judicial branch is given power over all cases in the law. And I thought this was interesting when I read through the Constitution recently. Federal district courts are given the original jurisdiction, except in a very few cases, because there's been a lot of rhetoric from this administration about how, oh, the federal district courts, they can't do that. You know, they don't have the power. We need to go to the Supreme Court. But that's not true. As laid out in the Constitution, the Supreme Court is an appellate court. It is only for appeals, except in very, very narrow circumstances. So it's actually those district judges that are the workhorse of our judicial system. They're the ones who have the power to make those rulings. And it's only when someone wants to dispute those rulings that it gets kicked up to the appellate courts and then finally, in some cases, to the Supreme Court. So
now, to understand how the appellate courts work, so appellate appealing, it took me a while to make that connection.
Yeah.
But when you have your trial, you have the judge and you have a jury and you have people come and they testify and give evidence and they demonstrate this. When it gets appealed, they don't redo that.
No, they don't.
The appeal is only about looking to see what the process was. And so that's part of what an appeal court is not as, you could say as powerful, but they're not as involved with the details. They're just getting involved at the higher level. So that's why what the Supreme Court says is not the same thing as what the judge who was actually there when all the information happened and things like that.
That is a very good point. They don't rehear the evidence. They don't like go into all of that again. They're only ruling on whether the lower court judge made the proper interpretation of the law,
right,
and the process was adhered to properly.
Yes,
that's a very, very good point. And a lot of people, I mean, they're going to believe if their own government is saying, oh, well, district court judges can't do that, when it's a blatant lie. It's right there in the Constitution. The district court judges have the original jurisdiction. So it's very frustrating when you have your own government saying things that are blatantly untrue about such core things as our judicial branch.
Yes.
And I'm also very concerned about how much rhetoric we've gotten from administration officials about how judges are doing the wrong thing. They don't have that power. They're leftist and liberal. They're legislating from the bench. They ought to be impeached. There's been repeated rhetoric to that effect, even from federal organizations like the Department of Justice. It's crazy. That should not be happening. That's a real problem. Then we have Section 3. Treason is defined. So if you want to know what treason is, it's in the Constitution. And the reason I talked about that was because the president was making such a big deal about those 6 senators who made the video telling military members that they should not follow illegal orders. And he said they had committed treason by doing this, and they ought to be executed. And that's just wrong. It was not treason. If you want to know what it is, just look in the Constitution. It'll tell you. Yeah. Then we get to the amendments. So First Amendment, big one.
It's very powerful.
Yes, exactly. So let's start right off with the first part. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, why do I bring that up?
Hmm.
Well, this administration is explicitly stating that we are a Christian nation, and there's administration members that are openly hostile against non-Christian religions or even against atheists. So that's a real problem. We're not
Hmm.
supposed to be bringing a religion into government
Hmm.
according to the Constitution, and this administration is doing that openly.
It's kind of strange because just because a lot of the founders were Christian, I mean, what does it mean that we're a Christian nation? So we're going to execute or expel anybody who's not Christian? And I thought it was interesting to me when I was looking through the Constitution just recently. See, there's my Constitution book.
Mm-hmm.
That even before the First Amendment, in the actual original part of the Constitution, in Article 6, it says, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States.
Yeah.
So it's specifically, it's not just that nobody, you can't have any laws against a religion, but you cannot have any religious requirements for
Right.
holding an office in the United States.
You
And
can't
that
say, oh,
seems
well, if you're not a
very clear.
Christian, I don't know if you can be in the
Yeah.
government. Yeah,
Well,
exactly. You
and
can't say
I
that.
heard people talk about how, well, if you can't put your hand on the Bible and swear, blah, 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 blah. It's like you don't have to do anything
No.
on any book. There's no religious requirement.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way the framers did it on purpose.
Hmm.
If you go back and look at some of the things they wrote, they specifically said that they wanted that religious freedom to apply to any religion. They specifically mentioned the Muslim religion. At the time they called it Mohammedan
Hmm.
religion, and they mentioned like the Hindu religion. They specifically said that freedom should apply to every religion, including those. And so I'm very concerned about the hostility that's
Hmm.
exhibited by the current administration towards religious freedom and trying to advocate for only Christianity.
And it's getting more
Um,
and more reflected in
yeah,
normal, regular people, which is again part of the problem
it
of
is.
the
It is because
incivility
it
that you were
gives
talking about earlier.
permission for hostility
Hmm.
and hate and violence.
Hmm.
Basically, frankly, I'm very
Rejection.
concerned about that.
Yeah.
Then the First Amendment also talks about freedom of speech. We're having some real problems with that with this administration. Um, any words?
There have always been disagreements about freedom of speech, but it's way more blatant and specific in a lot of areas
Yeah,
now.
and it's not just arguing; it's banning certain
Yes.
speech.
Yes.
Any words related to what's termed DEI are banned from government-related documents. They've been pressuring states to ban that type of language. The president has called for firing comedians who say things he doesn't like. He's sued media corporations for content he doesn't like. A new government task force has been formed to find and investigate groups that espouse anti-American ideas, and these groups that have ideas that the administration doesn't like have been called domestic terrorists repeatedly by this
Yeah.
administration. If you look at the recent National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM 7, it's very disturbing how it defines some of these domestic terrorist groups, saying that common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. That's very disturbing to me. Even though, I mean, I agree with being proud of your country and that people should be able to do capitalistic activities, and I am Christian and I have a pretty traditional views on family and religion and morality, but I'm like, why how are we turning this around to be equal domestic terrorism?
Well,
That's
and
really
capitalism,
concerning to me. Now,
like
as
defining capitalism as being part of America, it's not like it talks about we have to have a
no,
economic system in the Constitution at all.
well, no, and and now part of our founding principle of the United States has always been the most freedom that we can have, we want
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And I think almost every American would like less government overreach. And this is an example of huge government overreach that we can't even say certain things or believe certain things or espouse certain things, uh, or we're going to be called domestic terrorists and we might be detained or locked up because of it. That's very concerning to me. Uh, and it should be to, I think, anyone who thinks we should have a smaller government.
Hmm.
Then there's freedom of the press. That's
Oh, really?
also under attack.
Which is interesting because that's different than the comedians.
Yeah,
Sometimes they talk about the comedians like they're the press. They're
no,
not.
no,
They're
they're
just
not.
entertainers.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, Now we've talked about how the press is almost like a fourth estate or whatever, where
Hmm.
they basically help hold all the parts of our government to account. And I think
Hmm.
that's critical. I think that's important. And from what I understand, by custom, we have not hardly ever prosecuted people who leaked information to the press. And that's only been more recently that we started doing that. And I think it's because it's so important that we be able to have whistleblowers to be
Hmm.
able to let us know if somebody in the government is doing something wrong. Because we as average American citizens, we're not there. We don't know what's necessarily going on inside the government, and if no one's saying anything about it, we need to be able to find out if they're doing something wrong. And that's a lot of where the press comes in
A
and
lot of the
where it's,
problem, I think, is that when you talk about leaked information, sometimes you're talking about classified and sometimes you're just talking about something that happened.
yeah,
And it can be used in both senses to make people get the idea that we're trying to prosecute these people as if they were telling classified information, but they're only doing like, this is the instruction I got from my boss, which is,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily anything that's against the law
Oh, yeah.
currently. Um, so what are some examples of problems we've been having? At certain press not being allowed at White House press briefings, press banned from the Pentagon unless they agree to pre-vet all their content with the leadership there. Media organizations have been threatened multiple times with withdrawal of their licenses by the FCC chairman. Media organizations that wanted a merger approvals. One of them was told it had to accept a monitor assigned by the administration. The Stars and Stripes military publication has been restricted in what it can publish. There's been a
Oh.
lot of infringements on the press
Hmm.
by this administration, which I find very worrying. We need the
Very much.
press. We need that independent journalism, investigative journalism, so that we know what's going
Hmm.
on and we can hold our own government accountable, because ultimately that's what the Constitution set up. We, the
Hmm.
people, hold our government accountable. And so we have to know what's going on. And that's part of it for the press. Um,
Absolutely.
then the First Amendment gives the right for people to peacefully assemble. Now, some of it lately hasn't been quite peaceful, but, and if it was me, I probably wouldn't be screaming, F bombs and, throwing things and stuff. But um, a lot of people have been protesting, especially in regards to the immigration policies
Hmm.
that have been really aggressively prosecuted this administration. And they have not been doing anything violent and yet
Hmm.
have still been targeted. Um, our administration members have repeatedly said that protesters should not be protesting and they should just stay home.
Hmm.
Um, they've been accused by administration members of impeding federal operations even when they weren't.
Yes.
Um, they've been repeatedly called domestic terrorists. Yeah,
Yes.
both protesters who've been killed by federal immigration agents and those still living.
Mhm.
Multiple observers slash protesters have been told by federal immigration agents that they're being added to a database of domestic terrorists.
Mhm.
Now that's wrong. Protest is a right given to us in the Constitution that we should be able to do that, and they wanted to make sure we had that right.
And
Now,
imagine being scared to fly to another country to visit your family or to
yeah,
go on vacation or anything like that because somebody took a picture of you at a protest. And no matter, even if somebody else at the protest was violent, then now you have this blanket on you that this crosshairs on you and
yeah,
things like that.
exactly. Yeah, and I find that very dangerous
Hmm.
to be doing that, and because we need to be able to protest legally, yes, but we need to be able to protest. The Constitution also calls for us to be able to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and I think that's incredibly important. And besides the discouragement of protests and the call for people to be put on domestic terrorist databases and such, oversight bodies and ethics sections have been gutted by this administration. I was just reading a story the other day about the organizations that used to take complaints from detained immigrants
Hmm.
has been shut down.
Oh,
Just Congress members are supposed to be able to oversee immigration facilities, and they've not been let in many
uh-huh.
circumstances. There's,
And they've
um,
been prosecuted for trying to have their rights to go in.
yeah, exactly. Inspectors general have been fired. 75% of them have not been replaced. Agencies and oversight agencies have been gutted. Ethics sections for all kinds of federal agencies have been gutted. Um, they've removed the people who used to watch the government
Hmm.
in large part. And I've read a ton on this, and it's really serious. It's beyond
Hmm.
anything that's ever been done before. And it's through systemic throughout our federal government and all the federal agencies. And a lot of people who are currently in those agencies are sounding the alarm,
Hmm.
even in our federal immigration agencies. A lot of agents are speaking up and saying, hey, this is a problem.
Hmm.
It's not just leftists, it's all the people who are actually believe in the mission of those agencies and who have been in those agencies, who have been in charge of training, who have been in charge of reporting, who have been in charge of all that. They're all sounding the alarm. It's so many different people. It's not just a few fringe people. So many
Yeah.
people.
Well, and if you think about that, they already winnowed down the group to people who are really committed, and then those people are starting to complain.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah, it's
significant.
very telling. Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it is just shown by the huge amount of information that people are sharing with the
Hmm.
press because they're very concerned. Um, there's the law firms who acted against the Trump administration in the past who were illegally targeted.
Hmm.
Security clearances removed, access to federal buildings denied. Some of them were forced to be make settlements with the government to give free legal advice and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so that has a really chilling effect on anyone who wants to bring a grievance against this administration in the courts, especially if a law firm is not willing to do that anymore because they might get targeted. But
Yeah.
the law firms who took that to court actually, they got the decision in their favor. The judges said, yeah, that was totally illegal to
Well,
target
and
those
in
law
general,
firms.
people have to have resources to
Yeah,
petition the government for, and that's a problem. It's been a problem that you have to have resources to do that.
yeah.
And
This
again,
just
that's
makes it
something
worse.
not as urgent because it's been around for a long time, but that is one of those longer term things that needs to be fixed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure. We shouldn't have one set of justice for people with money and another set of justice for people who don't have money.
Right.
Yeah. And there's the Second Amendment. You wouldn't think this administration would be infringing on that. That's the right to bear arms. But after the shooting of Alex Preddy, we had multiple federal officials who were saying it was wrong and should be illegal to carry a firearm. to a protest activity, even if that citizen has a license to carry. So that should be a real red flag right there.
Mm-hmm.
The Fourth Amendment, it's about unreasonable search and seizure. That's
Oh, that's huge.
really been egregious. It has come out that there was a quiet DHS memo stating
Mm-hmm.
that no warrant would any longer be needed for federal immigration agents to break into homes. And there's been many home entries without a warrant. That's a real problem. That goes straight against the Fourth Amendment.
Well, part of it is that there's more than one kind of warrant.
Yeah, well, administrative warrant versus judicial warrant. You're
Right.
supposed to have a judicial warrant to be
Uh-huh.
able to go into homes, but there's even been many home entries in the last 18 months without even an administrative warrant.
Yeah, yeah. And the
So,
difference, in case you don't know, judicial warrants are from
a
the
judge.
judiciary and administrative warrants are from the executive branch. So that's, again, it's just the one unitary branch theory without the idea of having to go to the judiciary to get the warrant is to make sure that you're being independent, that it's not just the police just saying, I just want to go prosecute this person or go arrest this person, that there has to be somebody who says that there's a
Some
reason
level
to
of
consider
proof
it.
that you ought to go
Yes,
do that.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
And administrative warrants don't need that at all, which is basically all the immigration warrants are administrative warrants.
Yes, they are. And then, of course, there's been so many instances of federal immigration agents stopping citizens on the street and just asking to see their paperwork and detaining them if they don't have it or they don't want to show it. That's
Mhm.
happened lots of times. And that is not something that is supposed to be happening in the United
Yeah,
States. You're not supposed to have to show your paperwork
yeah,
just anywhere.
yeah. And and people are like, but if you have your paperwork, then you're fine. It's like, but you're going to get pulled over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
And yeah,
That's not supposed to be what's happening in our United States of
no.
America.
And just because somebody's not a citizen does not mean that they are not covered by the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
They still have those protections, whether or not it's kind of like just because somebody murders doesn't mean that we can take away their right to a trial. We still give them a trial.
Right. Exactly. You got it. Then there's the Fifth Amendment, due process of law. That's
Yeah,
been
back to that.
really, really a problem, largely related to immigration
Mhm.
issues. We've had
Well, the
immigrants.
exploding the boats thing too.
Yeah, that too.
Hmm.
Immigrants sent to foreign prisons only on the suspicion of gang membership, even if they were in a gang. You can't just send them to foreign prisons without any kind of trial or
Yeah, yeah,
proof of they've done anything that broke the law.
yeah.
It's crazy. And then it turned out most of them weren't even a member of a gang, even if that was a justification.
Well,
We've had,
and what's the one about it's a different amendment about inappropriate punishment and things like that. I don't know anything that I've heard about that prison. That is totally
oh, yeah, that's
beyond the
like one of
bounds
the
of
worst prisons in the world. Yeah,
yeah,
Seacott prison. Yeah.
yeah.
And then there's immigrants detained when they're following the legal process for seeking asylum and being kept in detention. That's in the courts right now,
Yeah, I love
too.
that. You go to court because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing,
Yeah,
and
and
then you
then you
get
get
picked up,
arrested. Yeah,
and that
exactly.
really encourages people to do what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
If
I
you
don't
think
think
about it.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's immigrants transferred to other states and denied regular access to legal counsel. More than 100 immigration judges have been fired or let go. Only a few new immigration judges have been hired.
And
Military lawyers.
it was already agreed that we didn't have nearly enough
Yeah,
immigration judges.
we only had 700 or so
Yeah.
for the whole country, and we had like 3 million or something
Yeah,
pending
cases are
cases.
totally backed up all over.
It's
And
like, we just got how many billions of dollars for DHS? Can we please hire a bunch more immigration judges, please?
mhm.
Like 500 more? That'd be great.
And
But
again,
we haven't.
immigration judges are not part of the judiciary.
Yeah,
They're part of the executive branch. It uses the
yeah,
same word, but they're separate. So it's not like it's really difficult to
to
hire
hire
them.
them. Yeah,
It's not like you
exactly.
need somebody who's anyway.
Yeah, exactly. We should have even more, not firing the ones we've got.
Yes,
They did
yes.
bring in some military lawyers that were pressed into service as temporary immigration judges, but I think that's kind of problematic in and of itself.
Well, and also they fired like the judge advocate generals, the military lawyers for, and so it's like you fire a bunch of military lawyers and then you're taking them and putting them in instead of immigration lawyers because you fired them. Again, back to it's also encouraging incompetence.
Yeah, exactly. Immigration judges are being told how to decide immigration cases by the DOJ. That's
Yeah,
a real problem.
yeah.
They should the immigration judges, even though they're not part of the judicial branch, are supposed to have independence in determining how the law is to be applied, and they're not being given that independence. They're being pressured. A lot of immigration judges have spoken up about that. DOJ lawyers are widely lying in court and on legal paperwork.
Blatantly lying.
Blatantly.
And the ones
Um,
who tell the truth get fired. Literally.
yes, yes, exactly. It's happening over and over again. Federal agents are widely lying about the actions of citizen protesters. Administration is ignoring many court orders related to immigration and to federal funds. So it's just blatantly, breaking that due process of law. And it's so important to have. I've heard so many people say, well, immigrants didn't do due process coming in, so they shouldn't get it going out. I'm like, no, no. We made a commitment as a country to make sure that do our best to give everyone that due process. And what does that even mean? It just means you get enough notification that you're going to have to go to court. You get a hearing in front of a judge.
You get a chance to tell your
That's
story.
it. Yeah, that's it. That's what due process is. We've made a commitment to do it. We could do it. We have the resources. We totally could do it. We should do it. And it's wrong for us not to. Then there's the 10th Amendment. That says the powers not delegated are reserved to the states and to the people. So we've had a lot of problems with federal overreach with this administration, where they're trying to take like states' rights, especially in regards to voting. There's been a lot of ways that they've tried to take over the voting process, and that's supposed to be delegated to the states. They have charge of the voting. So there's been many attempts to create a national voter registration, which would be vetted by the federal government. So many attempts to do that in many different ways. There's been attempts to prevent mailing of ballots. There's one right now where the United States Postal Service has said, well, we're going to go ahead and enact this because the federal government told us to. And they're saying they're not going to mail ballots to people who are not on a federally approved list.
Really? I had not heard that one.
Yeah, of course it's
That's
in court
horrible.
right now, but the United States Postal Service has said they're going to go ahead and enact that.
Now, I was talking with a friend of mine years ago about when the first whole mail-in ballot is evil kind of thing came up. And I told her that I voted mail-in when I was at college. The election right before that one, I had voted mail-in for the convenience of it. I worked as an election judge for a couple of years, and I saw how they were processed and how it was handled to make sure that you couldn't vote both mail-in and in person and all these different things. And she's like, no, 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 that's just so open for there being a problem. And I said, well, what about like people who are sick? And she's like, yeah, my dad's sick. And so he votes with, what's it called? It's basically a mail-in ballot, but for people who are too ill to go and vote. And I'm like, so what in the heck is the difference there? It's like, well, because he has a bad leg, he can't go in. I'm like, come on, people.
What about all the people who like have work on election day, or
Yes.
are elderly and have trouble getting out or whatever? In my state, everyone can vote by mail-in ballot,
Yep,
and
ours too.
so that's been really nice because since they enacted that, the participation in voting has gone up amazingly, because people have time to sit down in their own homes, look at the ballot, do the research, mail it in. It's easy.
Yeah, I thought it was when I voted by mail that one year, it was so great because my husband and my older children who were adults, we sat around the kitchen table, We each looked at our own ballot. We looked stuff up. We discussed it, and then each of us voted. I don't even know how everybody else voted.
Yeah, same.
But it was a really great. I mean, we talk about everybody should vote, but everybody needs to be at least informed a little bit rather than just going and picking everybody whose name starts with a vowel.
Yeah.
And I think mail-in voting is very helpful for that.
Yeah, I agree. But, but even if you decide you don't want mail-in voting, that has to be a decision by the state.
Exactly.
It's not the federal government coming in and saying, well, we're just not going to mail ballots to anyone who doesn't register with us. That's incredible overreach in taking away states' rights.
The federal government's not even in charge with mailing ballots or any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the attempts to ban mail-in voting completely, there have been a lot of attempts for that, and explicitly calling for gerrymandering to benefit the majority party.
I hate gerrymandering.
Such a problem. I don't like gerrymandering at all. I don't care. I'm sad that blue states are gerrymandering in retaliation. I don't want gerrymandering. I just want a free and fair election. That's what I want. I think we ought to have a lot more tight legislation on banning gerrymandering, and that's in one of the 80% project that I was talking about before. That's one of the things in there, is to get rid of gerrymandering completely, because all of us normal people want that.
Yeah. and the courts have said that political gerrymandering is okay.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely disagree with.
I disagree with that.
Yeah.
Totally. Exactly. There are ways to do those districts so that they're not partisan, and we should be doing that. I agree. Then there's illegally withholding congressionally appointed funds from states to try to force compliance with administration directives. That's totally illegal. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Lately, they've been threatening to remove customs inspectors from the airports in cities that have sanctuary policies. That's just wrong. That should not be happening. You should not be trying to force these states to comply with the administration priorities by withholding things or taking money or whatever. That's just wrong. Shouldn't be doing
I learned
that.
a year or two ago what a sanctuary city was. I used to think that it was, you can come here and we were not going to prosecute you for anything like that, and that you're safe here from being in trouble for
a lot
this
of
or that.
people think that. It's
And
not
that is
true at
not
all.
what it means at all.
No.
Do you want to go into it now or do that another time?
Just briefly. We'll basically say, okay, sanctuary policies just mean that cities or counties or whatever's law enforcement does not directly assist federal immigration agents in detaining people. Now, there's different levels of it too. Some of them will help a little bit. Some of them just won't do anything. But that's all it means. Federal immigration agents can still come in. They can still do whatever they need to do to detain immigrants. There's no city or county in the United States where arrest warrants are not honored. They're honored everywhere.
And I listened to an interview with the governor of New York recently, and I liked how she presented it. She's like, ICE has their own budget. They don't get to come in and tell our police to do their job.
Yeah.
And and she's like, and that's what it means by sanctuary city, is that we are going to be in charge of going after the criminals. You can go after the illegal immigrants or whatever, but you cannot take our resources and put them under your control.
Right.
I thought that was a great explanation.
Yeah, I think so too. And a lot of cities that make that decision is not just because they're concerned about immigrants necessarily. It's because they are concerned about crime.
Exactly.
If people are afraid to talk to the police because they're illegal or someone in their family is illegal, then they're not going to report the crime, and the crime is going to go up.
Yep.
That's a big reason why a lot of cities have sanctuary policies. But anyway, yeah, that was a good thing to talk about. And then there was trying to ban states from being able to regulate AI.
Oh,
that was in the big, beautiful budget bill.
I didn't see that one. Oh, man.
Yeah, they took that out. Fine.
Oh,
well,
good.
Thankfully, the parliamentarians
AI,
took it out.
Congress really needs to work on AI.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah.
I mean, it's not that it,
well,
just that it needs to be figured out.
Yeah, and states need to
Yes.
figure that out too, what they
Yeah.
want. But yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So we need that ability to regulate AI in our home states,
Yes. Yes.
please.
To figure it out. Yes.
Then there's the whole Birthright Citizenship Amendment, the
Oh my
14th
word.
Amendment. This administration has actively sought to overturn this amendment, the entire amendment, and that,
Using executive laws first, executive orders first.
which is
It's like
not a
executive
law,
orders do not trump law, and they especially don't trump the
constitutional
Constitution.
amendments. Exactly. Yeah,
Yes, the word Trump, that's
yeah.
um,
And then there's the
strangely
20,
used there.
exactly. Then there's the 24th Amendment. The right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged, which is a problem with some of the restrictions. And then also by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Now, why does that come into play? Because all the proposed legislation around voting, it would require people to pay for, take time off of work to get the documents necessary to prove their citizenship, which I think is okay. I don't really have a problem with that, but people should not be required to pay for that because
Hmm.
that effectively is a poll tax. So the proposed law would go into effect immediately, the SAVE Act, and provide no funding allowance to obtain citizenship documents. And so it's effectively a poll tax because it immediately goes into effect. If you have to re-register for any reason, you would have to come up with those documents if you don't
Well,
have
not to
them.
mention if it goes immediately into effect, then you don't have time to re-register and apply for things. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know whether or not they're registered. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's
I
just
see a lot
it's
of
just an
problems with that.
impediment. It's not an absolute bar to voting, no, but it makes
Mm-mm.
it harder.
But
And
that's what poll
so,
taxes are. They weren't
yeah,
absolute bars to voting.
yeah, exactly. But that's the problem. So if we did enact that, then it would need to be a situation where we'd have enough time for everyone to
Hmm.
get their documents, and there would need to be assistance to help people get the documents, and
Hmm.
like maybe even at the polling place
Hmm.
they could look you up, help you get the documents, etc. You know,
Yep.
that needs to be part of it if we do that. Um, so that's kind of like a lot of infringements on the Constitution that we're talking about. And as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of signing of the Declaration of Independence, I think more and more of us are kind of thinking back to the Constitution about the principles that we stand for as a country and about what we
Hmm.
want our country to be. And I think a lot of people are kind of discouraged
Oh yeah.
because they feel like our voice doesn't matter because in a lot of ways it hasn't
Hmm.
mattered. But as I've gone into the studying politics and government more and more, I've realized more and more that the people really do have the power.
Hmm.
Um, it will take coordination. It will
Hmm.
take sustained public pressure. But we've done it before, and we can do it again. I love listening to historians because they help us to understand that this has happened before. We've been in tight circumstances before,
Hmm.
and we have overcome. And I think that it will take work,
Hmm.
but we have a civic responsibility not necessarily to our government, but to each other.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, that's what it really is. It's to each other. And so if all of us are willing to take a little bit of time to get informed, to be
Hmm.
able to find where we can make our impact and to speak up, we can make a difference. We've
Hmm.
done this before as an American people, and we can do it again where we can have the country that we want to have. And we'll include
Absolutely.
some interesting resources for you to look into in our sources.
I'm going to look up that 80% bill project.
Yeah,
That sounds like a really great place to be supportive.
yeah, I agree. So, in closing, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us get the word out. Check out our
Yay.
Facebook, our Blue Sky, our Substack to keep up to date and to get more detailed information. We post frequently throughout the day. And welcome to the conversation. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Goodbye.
Bye.